Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This is Energy Speaks Back, powered by B2B Energy. My name is Paul Webb, the founder of B2B Energy, and I'm also your host. Each week, I bring to you energy experts from around the world. This is episode 176, and once again, we are still in the beautiful country of Malaysia. Our purpose, as always, is to provide a good understanding of energy management knowledge from around the world, which is available today for us to deliver savings that impact on our planet. Welcome, energy enthusiasts, to another enlightening episode of Energy Speaks Back, where I visited a leading airline from Kuala Lumpur, who are clearly making a difference and an impact on our industry. Please also look out for the video on my YouTube channel. In this episode, I meet with the Chief Sustainability Officer from AirAsia. We discuss how one of Asia's leading airlines is tackling the challenge of sustainability head-on, from reducing carbon emissions and integrating renewable energy, to driving culture change within the organisation. Our conversation highlights the practical steps AirAsia is taking to balance growth with responsibility, the role of leadership in building a sustainable future, and the innovation strategies shaping aviation's next chapter. So without any further ado, let's take off with our discussions with Mun Ching. Good morning, Mun Ching. How are you today?
Good morning, Paul. I'm very well indeed. Welcome to AirAsia. So I think you've chosen a nice spot right in front of the engine.
I picked an amazing, as long as it don't start up, I think we'll be all right. Does it suck or blow that end? Because it suck us in? Yeah, so not a good place to be sitting, really.
Not a good place. Not on the tarmac, definitely not.
No. Well, honestly, thank you very much for this opportunity. And it's just an amazing country, amazing building. And we've had some really amazing conversations already about, obviously, both our favourite subjects, sustainability. So I've already learned a lot about yourself, and I'll be honest, I've been researching you as well. Mm-hmm. So I know a little bit about you. Yeah. But for the benefit of our audience, it'd be really great to get a good understanding of yourself and what brings you into this industry and your origin story.
Well, yeah, I think we were having this conversation, how far back do we go, right? So I've had quite an unusual career, you could put it that way. I think my first job was with an oil and gas company, short period, and absolutely not for me. And I decided to choose something for myself, and I went into journalism. And that was actually specifically on political journalism. So that was a very interesting time of my career. I was starting out, and I would recommend it to anyone. A great way to get to know your country, the systems, the society, and you meet people from all walks of life.
Wasn't you a column writer at one time?
Column as well. Column came after that. So, the first thing was really about political journalism. And of course, the media landscape here is very different from what probably you're used to in the UK. So I was working with an online organization. So it opens up a lot of new freedoms for us to write. But it was fantastic training in communications, in writing, in talking to people from different walks of life, talk to people who are really living on the margins of society, but also CEOs and top politicians. So that was great background and sort of brought me unexpectedly into aviation. So I interviewed the founder of the company, Mr. Tony Fernandez. He might be known to people, very well known to people in the aviation industry. And we were having a very interesting conversation because he spent quite a bit of time in the UK as well. He went to boarding school there. But I went to university in London. So we were having this conversation about how the landscape was changing in the UK, EasyJet coming into the picture back then. This was even before Ryanair, and then Ryanair came into the picture, and we were having this conversation. And then he said, you asked me really good questions. You should come and work for me.
All right. Yeah. So that means if I asked you some good questions today, I could be working for you, maybe?
Well, you will have to ask him those questions.
All right.
So then I said, what do you want me to do? I have no aviation background. And he said, his background was actually nothing related to aviation as well. He was from the music industry. And he said, I was from the music industry. I'll teach you anything you want to know. And I said, okay, sure. I mean, this guy's crazy, and I would be crazy not to take up this opportunity.
Yeah.
So my first job at AirAsia was as a route planner. So when I started, we had a small fleet, about 15 planes, or less actually. I think it was only about 13. And it was mostly a domestic carrier at that time. So my job was to start the regional network and to build the regional connectivity. And that was great. It was traveling around the region, finding new locations, doing the business case, and that sort of grew into many things. So I started with routes. Eventually, I was in charge of strategic planning for the company. So I did fleet planning. So essentially, if I put it in layman's terms, I did all the planning between the day the aircraft leaves the factory in Toulouse, right down to where it is located, where it flies, and what time it flies to. So there was an entire planning process behind it. So I did that for a few years, a huge amount of highlights during that time. Also, China was opening up, and we were, the early days going into the Chinese market was exhilarating. And then, I did it for 4 years, covered the whole region. The last country we opened up was Laos. Flight to Laos, Vientiane. My last destination was really Manado in Indonesia. So that was the time that it started. I took a career break in between. I went to the UK again. I did my master's.
What did you do your master's in?
International relations.
Right.
This was my original course that I wanted to do, but I ended up doing economics for my first degree. So I got a lovely scholarship from the British government.
Thank you very much.
I spent a lovely year in a very eye-opening year.
Whereabouts did you live when you was there?
I was really in central London. I was actually right across from Spitalfields Market.
Wow, that is central.
It's a lovely place to be in, and also close to East London, which was really very exciting at that time. I always enjoyed the periods that I was in the UK. And I think to many Malaysians, it is a second home because it's a lot of history together, right? So I came back and I spent a year at the Ministry of Trade, working in the minister's office, and then eventually I met Tony again, and we started AirAsia Foundation. So that was before sustainability came into the picture, but we were looking beyond, usually when you talk about foundation, they're doing charitable activities, but we were looking beyond that. Yeah. How do we build it into the business strategy? So we also looked at things like sustainable tourism back then, the impact that, kind of low-cost travel would have on destinations, but also things like human trafficking. Obviously, Southeast Asia is a big risk area, so 25% of global victims come from Southeast Asia. So what do we do in order to strengthen our kind of checks within our system, whether it is to detect cases of human trafficking, training our staff to know what to do, and how to strengthen our internal systems as well. So then kind of during COVID, sitting at home was terrible. We had no flights, so sitting at home.
Was there no flights at all?
Complete stop.
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy. And every day we were thinking...
Was that overnight it stopped?
No, it kind of went... it was quite abrupt.
Abrupt, yeah.
But it was scaling down from 150 planes in the air to 20 planes. And then right to some point, there was really absolutely no flights at all. And every day you're thinking, which day will I lose my job? Then one day I got a call. I said, oh, this is the day that I'll be laid off maybe. Then Tony said, I think you need to take over sustainability. And my initial reaction was like, what? Now? Like, who has time for sustainability? We don't even know whether the company will still exist in a month's time, right?
Yeah.
So I said, you got to do it. So the initial part was really to find out what was essential, and it was driven by very compliance matters. We had to do sustainability reporting to the stock exchange, so that was the basis of it. And then as I dug into it, then we kind of realized that a lot of the focus is just wrong. It was focused on very external PR-related activities, but not really looking internally on the essentials that you need to resolve. And for aviation, it's closely tied to the business sustainability because 40% of our cost is on jet fuel.
Yeah.
And jet fuel is the main contributor to our Scope 1 emissions.
And it's funny, when you think about an airline,
Yeah.
like we've had some conversations today, first thing you think about is the plane, the fuel.
Correct.
You know, you don't think about the staff, the buildings.
Yeah.
That's the last thing on your thoughts, isn't it? And that's the same for obviously running a business as well.
I mean, in essence, that is driven by the way the compliance rules are kind of structured. We are being pushed to look into Scope 1, and 90% of our Scope 1 emissions are flight emissions. You're right, there are also the Scope 2 emissions, the Scope 3 emissions, but of the huge amount that we have to deal with in terms of Scope 1, that ends up sucking up most of the resources. But it doesn't mean that we're not looking into it. But I think people always assume that, you know, a company is monolithic. It really isn't. You know, you have different people in management, different people in the boards, and you have to convince everyone, and everybody have different understanding and different buy-in. So the easiest way is to start with what is compliance, what you need to do to comply with the law, and then you can scale up to build more ambition into what you want to do.
Do you think one of the trigger points in COVID regarding sustainability was the fact that there was no planes, there was no ships, seawater started to become more clearer, the air was clearer, and it was strange. So I live in near Southend Airport, where EasyJet fly in all day long. You hear them going in and out the airport. All of a sudden, silence.
Nothing, silence,
You know, and it's only now that it started picking up that noise again.
Yeah.
And so what I'm thinking of, that it triggered everyone's mind that maybe sustainability is the area we need to be focusing on.
I think for us it was less of that, because as you've been to the KL airport, it's really in the middle of almost nowhere when it first built. So we don't really have so much problem in terms of noise pollution and the community around us, and that was actually the reason why it was moved out here. Before that, the KL airport was right in the heart of the city, and that was, you know, started getting into a lot of conflict with the communities around it. So that's why it was moved out here. But back then, people weren't really, you know, kind of aware of things like your commuting emissions and things like that. So there is a trade-off, you know. So by putting it all the way out here, it does require a lot of carbon emissions for people to commute as well. But the main impact that was evident during COVID was the impact on the destinations. So we fly to a lot of really high traffic destinations like Bali, obviously, and Phuket. And I'm not sure if you're aware, Boracay was so polluted that the president called it a cesspool and shut it down. President Duterte. And he basically said, this is a cesspool, I totally shut it down. And so many people lost their jobs and livelihood, but it was necessary for the island. And eventually they rebuilt much better if you see the kind of things that they've done in the last few years. Unfortunately, that's the only...
And was that one of your routes?
Yes, Phuket is one of our major routes. Bali is a major route, and the environmental impact on Bali is horrendous. I mean, I've been to Bali since when I first started my career. Even in the last 20 years, the change is horrible, and I don't actually like going there anymore because the congestion, the traffic, you know, it's quite shocking, you know, when you see massive hotels being built on beautiful cliffs. But we are a part of the problem to it. So how do we contribute to it?
Because you're making it accessible.
We make it accessible. So anyone can go there, and people go there just for the weekend. And there is a cost on the local community. But it's not necessarily easy for us to also say, no, we don't want to fly there, because that is a pillar of the Indonesian tourism economy. So how do you diversify from that? And that's where, you know, looking into the network comes in. So we never actually just focus everybody into these destinations. We've broadened our network. We've got 18 destinations in Indonesia. I'm not sure if you're aware, we've got one of the largest networks into India and China, and none of it through all the capital cities. We have direct flights to about, I think, 16 cities in China, 15 cities in India, about 18 cities in Indonesia. So you don't concentrate all the traffic into just one or two airports. You introduce people to other places that actually need the tourism, and work with local communities on how to better manage the tourism that you bring in. So the latest one is very interesting. It's actually Japan. You know, so Japan is now become much more accessible for tourism, but it's not actually built for mass tourism. So I was recently in Japan, in Nagano, and they're actually having this debate internally. How do we have tourism without eroding what was the very old community structures that also has inbuilt environmental protection in them. When you have a lot of people coming in who do not understand these community structures, there will be conflict. So interestingly, these are the conversations that we are actually having in places like Japan.
Yeah. It's funny how the job you had originally has evolved, because it's still really the same job, but you're just talking around about the benefits of it, or the stopping certain things happening to that.
Correct.
So it's a similar job, isn't it? But it isn't as such.
Well, when I talk to people, friends, and it's like, you don't seem to have a career plan. You like hop, but to me, that is a very logical plan. And if you know how to make use of the skills that you have to build it into what you're doing now, and I think that's essential to what I'm doing now, because sustainability is not a profession. It's not one discipline. It's basically understanding every aspect of the business.
It's part of it, isn't it?
Yes, and seeing how those values build into that part of the business, right?
Yeah.
So, our
and it's difficult. Like we talked about the sustainability story. It's a great story. We can do lots of things, but then bring it into the business. I've spent some time with you today to understand the culture, what we've got here, and then we as individuals, we've got the story. We know what we want to do with the sustainability story.
Yeah.
Then we've got to then bring it in to this big boulder, and we've got to shift this boulder that says, well, we've always done it that way. That's the difficult, and I presume that's probably the biggest challenge that you have.
It is. It's changing people's mindsets, right? And that's where the journalism training comes in. And you've told me that, you can talk to anyone. That's me as well, because I've talked to people who, really are homeless or on the margins of society. And then you also have to deal with the CEO. So it's the same in a corporate setting, right? You have people who believe in climate change, people who don't, and anything in between. There are some who believe in it, kind of, if it's convenient, or their understanding is very basic. They think it's really about planting a tree. Do
you think that mindset's changed though?
It has definitely in AirAsia, because I'm not an easy person to bat away.
Now you've made it change. No, what I mean is, as the culture is starting to change.
It has. Yeah, definitely. It has made a huge difference, and I have also heads of departments who are now taking their own initiative to drive many new initiatives through, and I think we discussed some of them as well. It's not all driven from me. Initially, yes, we have to convince them why, and then and essentially it's a really one of the things I learned during my master's course in the UK, and that was very essential. It's something called the strategic aspects of international relations. It's not telling them what you want, it's telling them what you want in a language that they understand. So if that person is more inclined to, believe that I'm going to do something good for the planet, then you have to couch it in a way that meets what their expectations
what it means
be.
To them.
And that's where I'm good at. And it has made a difference, So, but it's not always easy. You do come across people who are extremely resistant. Then you have to find different strategies of dealing with it.
Yeah. One thing that has come across to me, that this is driven at a very high level. It's not driven. I've worked with organisations where we're here in amongst the pond, fighting our way through the journey of energy management and sustainability. Looking up, saying help us, basically. But you've got that coming down from the top already, which must be making a big difference already.
Well, yes and no. I think our societal awareness of environment matters is much, much lower. I think Malaysia has always been a fortunate country. We have subsidized electricity, we have subsidized water. So nobody takes these seriously, unlike places where you have already issues with security, water security, energy security. We don't. We have it in abundance, and it has been kind of boiled into our system that it's cheap. But it's no longer cheap. So to get people to change that mindset is something that I don't think as a society we are as advanced as it should be yet. It's only now when people are feeling the effects of climate change. So on the ground, there are people, of course, pockets of people who are very interested. So we have cabin crew, for example, who keep asking me, so can we do something with you? And it's also a matter of having to take time to come up with something where they can work on to spread awareness in the cabin as well.
Yeah.
So there are multiple layers that we also work with.
The challenges that you're finding, you mentioned earlier, you 20,000 staff roughly around the world?
Around the region. So we are based in 5 countries in Southeast Asia. We operate 7 airlines. I mean, the bulk of them will be operation staff. I think you can see walking in front of us our cabin crew. There will be a large number of them. And of course, pilots. Then of course you have the office staff. Yeah.
And most of your teams are direct employment. There's not a lot of outsourcing?
Mostly directly employed. I mean, outsourced in the sense that we do have ground handling companies and MRO business, but they are businesses that AirAsia started. So in a sense, those staff are employed by.
And do you find there's challenges getting those messages all the way through to each of those individuals?
Yeah, absolutely. And each of them, as they spin out, I mean, before this, everybody was within the same umbrella. But as the company grew, these became separate companies. And as they have separate companies, they have different shareholding. And so it carries also a little bit of challenge because they have culture that is brought in from other entities as well. So it is always a work in progress. Yeah, there's no quick answer to that.
And how do you think, so all these different organisations, again, you were saying about different people, your approach to each of those is going to be different, isn't it?
Yes, correct. And you have to find which are the champions within each organisation, and you have to work through those champions. And I mean, unfortunately for me, my team is small. I think I mentioned my team is 10 only, and it's spread around the region. So sometimes we do have to choose our battles, like where do you want to focus on? So it's also looking at the cost and benefit, right? So we tend to focus a lot more on the aviation business. The next one we're looking at the MRO business, and that's where my contact with you come in, because what is sustainability priority for an airline is not necessarily the same for an MRO. So for airline, it is definitely our flight emissions, but for MRO, it's energy security and energy costs. And that is an area that is completely new to me. I think one of the assumptions that I have in this company will be that, sustainability, she knows everything. There's no way you can know everything, right? And every business will have different priorities. So that's where, we've been talking.
Let's just touch on Malaysia again, on the grid, for instance, because you mentioned it's quite a dirty grid.
Yes, it's coal-powered. Coal-powered and to quite a high degree of dependence. There have been some feed-in tariffs from renewable energy usage, but really not very substantial. I'm not very up to date on it, but as far as I knew, it was completely taken up already.
It's quite high.
So even if we do have renewable energy to sell it back to the grid, it might not even be accepted.
Where does that coal come from?
Actually, I'm not entirely clear.
Right.
Yeah.
Again, it's the external people think that you should know all the answers.
No,
it's
I don't.
One of those things, isn't it?
Because I'm not an energy expert.
No.
And I think that's one of the things that the burden on the aviation sector is very big, because here we're talking about energy usage, but our bulk of the concern is our fuel. So there's a lot of, kind of criticisms about the usage of fossil fuels and to replace it with biofuels, which we're okay with if somebody's looking into it, but no one is really properly looking into it. And then we are expected to also be experts on biofuels, experts on carbon markets. It was never our job. We were an airline. We were only meant to fly.
When we first met, you talked about SAF, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
And I was quite intrigued about it, because I didn't realise that you as organisations were being driven down that road of that. What's the percentages they're expecting you to
So
absorb?
they want 5% of emissions reduction to be through the use of SAF by 2030. But a very practical problem is that SAF pricing is firstly not transparent, and we are looking at anything between 3 times to 5 times the price of jet fuel. And if fuel constitutes 40% of your cost, it's not a light matter. So when you look around the world, there are different ways to deal with this. Of course, in the UK and in Europe, you've got mandates. But the mandates didn't come out of the blue. The mandates came from years of industrial policy to support the development of these technologies. In the US, they take a different approach. In the US, the government directly subsidizes production to bring the price down. So they're hoping that airlines will start using it, and then it helps scale up. But we don't have any of these. We just have governments that are coming down to say, here, we're going to put a
should do that.
mandate. But how?
Yeah.
How are we going to afford it? A pound for you is 5 ringgit for us, and the market absolutely cannot absorb it. So those are some of the challenges we are facing, and ironically, we have to be the ones to communicate it to the governments. The awareness, knowledge, the depth of knowledge of sustainability is actually pretty shallow. So when I go to international settings and we meet people who have spent their entire lives, the whole European team who spend their entire life just studying these sorts of energy transition methods, and then that's me part-time doing this. That's the scale of the challenge that we face. Right? Yeah. So the energy transition, yes, we have to do it, but the pace is very different. The challenges that we face are very different.
When I'm talking in the UK to someone like yourself, I'd always say energy is your 3rd largest expense, but it isn't here, is it? Because you've got that fuel cost.
Correct.
So that fuel cost must be probably...
Fuel cost is like 40%.
40%.
Yeah, staff cost is about 30% because it's of course we hire a lot of high-skilled, basically pilots, cabin crew. Those are high costs. So that's about another 30%, 25%.
Out of interest, how many pilots do you have?
Actually, I would say a few thousand.
Really?
Yeah. Yes. And
that's
pilots,
amazing. How many planes do you have? That's a question.
As a group, over 200.
200 planes.
Yeah, over 200 planes.
And at any one time, do you know how many are in the air? Is there a high percentage of those 200? Or
that's a changing variable question, because we used to fly the majority of our fleet, but since COVID, that is one of the continuing struggles that we have in the industry. We're still about 10% down.
Right.
Because either it's due to a shortage of maintenance slots, a shortage of parts, which is a global issue. The supply chain is still disrupted and it hasn't come back to normal. So while we're still struggling to recover, we are having to face all these new costs without much support from governments, right? So,
and it's likely to be more. You mentioned ETS is coming in.
Yeah, and as you know, all our countries,
which again more cost, more work, etc.
And often it's introduced without sufficient kind of time for us to also pick up what are the new things that we need, right?
And we talked about earlier about the culture of that costs money to do these sort of things. So it's the spend to save approach.
Yes.
And that is another challenge that you have that you're looking at.
I think if you look at AirAsia, it's probably less of a hurdle than many other companies, because we've always had this culture of spend to save, and we've done it well, and that's one of the reasons why we've been successful.
Yeah.
To get the thinking of spend to save into energy is a new thing, because energy cost traditionally is completely neglected.
Yeah.
It's not a major cost item.
And also when you look at the industry, okay, and we've got fuel, high intensity fuel that goes into these very expensive, high-tech machines. To change that, we're talking about boulders, it's a big boulder to start to change. But you have had some success in that area. You've started looking at the cleaning the...
Yes, so we started.
So there are things that we can do that are quite simple.
Correct. So it's the technology now is available, is accessible. So for example, we used to so when a plane is parked on the tarmac,
which is something the normal person who didn't know
might just assume that it's... you wouldn't even think about this, right?
It's not even on our radar.
You go into a plane, it's cool, but it doesn't. The energy comes from somewhere. In Europe, you can use generators, which works in Europe because most of the year it's cold. But if you try that here, the cabin will be in 36 degrees in minutes, and there's no way people can put up with that. So in order to have air conditioning, you actually have to turn on an engine on the plane, which uses jet fuel.
Right.
So that's why usually on the tarmac it's noisy, you can smell the fumes. So yes, the generators are available, but the generators will only solve the electricity problem, doesn't solve the air conditioning problem. So there is a new equipment that is available now. They are called combo units because it combines air conditioning as well as ground power units. It's not new, it's been here for about 5 years, but it actually got introduced to us just before COVID, and then during COVID no one was really looking into it. So we revived this project last year, and now we are actually rolling out across our entire group. And in fact, they are in short supply now. We have to fight for these equipment.
Right.
And other airlines are finding, AirAsia is using it, we want this too. So it, in a sense, it triggers a sort of competitiveness to get this. But I can tell you this is a technology that reduces cost and reduces emissions by a huge degree, 90% reduction in emissions.
Wow.
But in order to apply it properly, it requires a whole ecosystem to agree to it. So you need the pilots to know that they're going to use this so they don't turn on the engine. You need the ground handlers to do the extra work to plug it in. You need them to be towed to the right bay. So you have to coordinate where the aircraft is arriving. So it's the human issues that are generally, technology-wise, it's not that difficult. You can have that machine, but if your people are not using it.
If they get it right, what impact have they made?
So if you get it right, you reduce your emissions by 90% while you're on ground, right? So in an airport's emissions, almost half of it is actually emissions generated by an aircraft while it's at the airport.
Yeah.
So we did some calculations based on Malaysia airports' emissions. It could, if we fully employ these in all airports, it could contribute to 8% of emission savings for an airport. And that's massive.
Yeah.
So are airports concerned about this? No, they don't care because it's not
their problem.
They say it's not a problem, it's an airline's problem.
Yeah.
But in an ideal setting, an airport
So when you pull into the bay, do they not plug you in? Or do they plug you in but not with the mains?
No, we do it. So it's like a generator, we plug it in.
Oh, right.
So then the other challenge we have is actually you can even further reduce the emissions because there are also e-versions of these equipment. But the airports are not equipped with electrical power. So, you can't charge your devices.
Yeah.
So in an ideal setting, an airport should be looking at it together with all these new technologies with the airline.
And there's limitations with solar because of the glare, isn't there? And pilots.
Well, I think you probably will be an expert for this. I think the glare issue can be resolved.
Yes.
I'm not an expert
There's
in
technology
that.
out there now to improve that, yes.
Angles of tilt.
Yeah.
There is also...
But originally that was the excuse not to do that, wasn't it?
Yeah. And
what about the cleaning of the plane? Because that's one thing I didn't realise.
You didn't realise, yeah.
As a passenger, I always get on the plane, always looks very clean, to me.
Well, most of the
That's
time
the
you
normal.
look at the inside of the plane.
No,
You're not looking at when you look at the outside.
I'm a bit of a petrol head, so I like to look at the body of the thing and looking at the outside. But they always look clean. But obviously they don't.
But actually,
realise.
if you come close, you will see that there's a layer of grime, and it does depend where you are. So there's a new technology called aero wash. So basically, it's almost like a crane, and it's like an arm, and it has like if you go into a car wash, you have those rollers. So this device actually can be deployed to the tarmac to clean the plane. Now, traditionally, the way planes are cleaned is so old school. You have to tow the plane to a hangar, and then you have to build scaffolding around the hangar, and then you deploy a team of, 8 people, 12 people, 20 people. And they're actually using brushes with water and spraying, like you wash a car.
I was shocked.
Yes, and the water will accumulate, you'll be using chemicals, and there will be differences in the scrub. Somebody can scrub harder, another person will scrub harder, and it introduces all sorts of risks.
So that's going to make it patchy, isn't it, in areas, which is even worse.
And so essentially why it's important is because anything you put on the plane affects its aerodynamics. The weight is number one. Number two is the surface. So the more grip you have on the surface of the plane, the more drag and friction it will have. So the fuel burn will be higher. You might not see it, but sometimes when the plane is in flight, there will be like trails of oil, and it sticks on the surface of the plane. And when it enters comes close to ground, that's when all the dirt in the air sticks onto a plane. So how much does it save? That's the other challenge, because some people, this is a new technology, so not that many airlines have deployed it. And when they deploy it, they don't always measure the impact. because so many things affect the fuel burn of the
but
plane.
until they've met
Isolate
yourself, you're going to start measuring it, aren't you?
So there's an airline that has measured it for wide body application. So we will be one of the first ones who will measure it for narrow body application.
Right.
And also in Southeast Asia, because the other operator is not in Southeast Asia, so it does depend on the atmospheric conditions as well. Yeah. So these are some of the new technologies that are available, accessible, reduces costs, but...
And you as an organisation, you're leading that, you're driving that.
Correct. Yes.
And hopefully others will follow.
Yeah.
You as an individual, are you one of these sort of people that like to stand up? Because I know you've done quite a few presentations and to tell people what you're doing. You're a great believer in that.
It has always been our story of AirAsia anyway, and we have always shared. Anyway, that's why many of these companies like to work with us, because it's kind of free publicity for their thing. So like combo units, we start using it, and then now all the other airlines want to have it. We were also instrumental to being a first implementer of some aviation software, which eventually got adopted by airlines like Indigo or Singapore Airlines. So I think a lot of times people have the impression that low-cost carriers are not as efficient, and it's very conservative and kind of old-fashioned view. And in fact, low-cost carriers are actually leading some of the innovations because our cost sensitivity is much higher. So the drive to reduce our fuel consumption is much, much higher.
Yeah. You talked on your last presentation, sorry, I've been sort of looking and researching you. You talk about kicking the can. Tell us the story, because I really like that, when you're talking about kicking the can.
Aviation is in a very interesting situation now because we are the first industry that's taking a global approach to emissions reduction. So for those who know, we are part of this scheme that is devised by the International Civil Aviation Organization called CORSIA. And what it does need is that airlines around the world will have to offset or reduce our emissions based on a already established emissions growth cap. But nobody appreciates the cost that you will be in the future. So now, as I do my forecast, I already know it's going to cost us anything between $30 million to $50 million if you take action today. Why? Because carbon solutions, such as carbon offsets, for example, are short in supply. So if you buy them early, you can get them at a more reasonable price than if you wait until you're close to the compliance deadline, which is in 3 years' time. So if you don't do enough data forecasting, you will not do anything about it, and then you wake up 3 years later and here's the bill that you will have. But to get people to take action early before there is a kind of, I don't know, a sword over your head is the challenging part, especially in aviation when there's so many demands on your liquidity. You might need it to pay for maintenance, you might need it to pay for engines. The last thing anyone wants to hear about is that here Mun Ching wants 20 million to pay for carbon credits, which nobody understands anyway, and that's only going to bite in 5 years' time, you know. Yeah. So, but as you kick the can down the road, this 20 million could be 40 million, could be 60 million, could be 100 million. And I think if you're familiar with EU ETS emissions trading, the allowances were traded at about $90 on average last year. Where, you know, this cost could easily be multiple fold.
Yeah.
So that's what sustainability is. It's really looking into the future and taking action today, but that's always the most challenging part. And it's to avoid kicking that can down the road.
Yeah. Amazing conversation. I think we've been speaking since 9 o'clock actually this morning. And I could talk to you all day, and you've been very sort of vocal regarding some of the stuff you're saying and what you're doing as an organisation. It's been brilliant. Thank you. So it's come to that stage in my interview, and I'm sure you've been seeing, you've actually listened to one. I know you've listened to one of them. Yeah. So it's come to that stage where I like to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
Is there anything you can give back to our industry and people listening to today?
I think we've already done a huge amount because I think I mentioned that the knowledge and awareness of aviation sustainability is very shallow. And originally, the industry, the way it's structured here is that aviation falls under the Transport Ministry. But now you're actually having to communicate these things to the energy industry, the Environment Ministry, and actually we drive most of this in the conversation in the region. So I travel frequently to Thailand, Indonesia, and we also talk to not only the people in the aviation industry, but we also talk to people in the carbon markets. And I do forecasts, so I model for the region, and we share these forecasts. I mean, this should be completely confidential.
Right.
But then I realized that there are very few people who know how to model, and unless you put a price on it, no one is going to pay attention. So you notice the difference immediately when you show this is what is going to be the cost to you, your industry, your economy. And this includes our competitors, because we're all in the same boat. I could not say anything, take care of myself. In the ideal world, that should be the case. I shouldn't have to worry about what my competitors do. But sometimes in order to move a regulator, you need your competitors on board as well. Because
you need to work together.
You have to work together.
The whole is greater than the sum of the parts.
Correct. So that's the reason why we do a lot of work around the region, and for better or worse, we are a regional operator. We are one of the few airlines we're the only airline that has operations in 5 countries in this region. So what we are doing is to help shape the policy in a way that protects the industry, ensures that our national objectives are met. Obviously, in Thailand, tourism is a major industry.
Yeah.
You can, if you put in environmental rules and you try to force certain regulations on the aviation industry, you could achieve what you want in terms of emissions reduction, but you could also kill the aviation industry. And it doesn't make sense. On the other hand, you're pumping subsidies into the tourism industry to try to rebuild that, because unless you have this connectivity, it's not going to work. So how do we balance all these requirements? Yes, we have to have national emissions reduction targets, but you have to make sure that industry can cope with it. But what are the knock-on impacts on the other industry? So I think that's our biggest contributor in this region, as AirAsia.
I like the way you communicate, like you was just saying that there's data that you shouldn't really be putting out there, but you do. And I think that's important to be open with what you're doing.
Yes, and I think what has really helped me is that, in a sense, I find that we've had a good listener in the government as well. I know I'm quite critical in some ways, but we have shifted some important areas. So, for example, 2 years ago, I think regulators also appreciate that this is changing so fast that not everybody can keep up. So they've set up task forces, one of whom I chair. And what they've done is they've also nominated me to international policy-making bodies, and that's where you can see what is actually developing at its source,
and also make a bigger difference.
Yeah, and most importantly, I meet experts like yourself in specific areas, and we don't have this sort of expertise here. So, for example, I built a model for this region. No one is here to check on it for me, but I met a European expert who has looked into my model and says, yeah, you've got it all covered. And that is very, very important, because I wouldn't know whether I've got it right? And he has very kindly looked through it with me, helped me plug some holes that I know that is robust, and I feel confident that I can share this data. So there is an element that somebody helps us, but we also have to do our part to bring the industry
and
up
share
to
the story. And share the story.
Share the knowledge and the story as well. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. I'm very excited to be here today. I didn't say to the audience that I'm actually in Malaysia, face to face. It's amazing how them planets align themselves. So, and thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for sharing your story. It's an amazing story, and we would like to one day continue the story with you to part 2, part 3. You never know. Yeah, it's brilliant. Mun Ching, thank you very much for your time today, and please, you and your family, stay safe in these times. Thank you to my guest for joining me today on Energy Speaks Back. I'm very proud and humbled to have the opportunity to interview energy experts from around the world, and I hope you found today's episode of value. Don't forget to listen to the previous episodes, because they are full of insights to help you make a real impact on energy efficiency. And remember, tiny changes that we make today can bring us profound savings in the future. Together, we can drive change and make a difference. That leaves me with one more thing to say. Please, you and your family, be safe in these times.